Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today on our launch event for our brand new version of PhoneView, version 4. Let's first of all have a wee look at the agenda that we're going to cover today. Now, what we'll do is I'll take you through just a couple of house rules around interacting with us on this webinar, and so we can all get the best results back and be able to answer all your questions that I'm sure you're going to have. But really what we're going to do after that is hand you over to our CTO, Stephen Welsh, who's going to take you through the new features that we have in the new release. Now, this release is basically featured around the ability to scale up some of the more labor-intensive processes that you've been asking us to do. So let's not beat about the bush. We're talking about ITL deletes mostly. So there's lots of features in there to help scalability of that, especially in very large estates. And there's also one or two other features that we've added which will help with the ease of use and the view of the actual phone screens themselves. But I won't go into that. First of all, let's just move on and we'll cover the house rules. Okay, so what we'd like you to do is, if you have any questions, is could you please ask the questions in the Q&A and not the chat box, in the Q&A box, and could you address it to all panelists? That way we can maybe answer some of your questions as we go along while Stephen is speaking, but if not, don't worry, we will go and review them and we'll cover them all off at the end. Okay, so without further ado, let me hand you over to Stephen Welsh, our CTO, and thank you all once again for attending.
Hi, thanks very much, Andrew, and thanks very much everybody for attending. I hope you enjoy some of the functionality that we've added as much as we've enjoyed adding it to the product. So a quick summary of what we've added, and we'll go into a bit more detail. The key thing is, that from a top level, from a user experience point of view, this has been asked for quite a lot, is the ability to actually control features on a per user or group basis, a form of policy, as you will. So that's a brand new feature that we've added, and I'll cover that in a little bit more detail. So rather than just having something like the help desk edition that we had before, which was kind of hard coded to certain parameters, you now have extensive control over what functionality you would like to provide to the users of our product, which is great. That therefore increases the number of scenarios of how you can use PhoneView, which is giving it wider exposure and value within your business, which is excellent. But actually, one of the biggest enhancements, and it's really one kind of tagline, which we've got listed as the next generation queuing engine. Now, the reason why I'm calling it next generation is I would class kind of first generation queuing as just a simple one by one exercise where you execute things sequentially. But actually PhoneView from the beginning had a parallel execution engine, so it could operate against multiple devices and phones at the same time, which was great. So you could chew through lots of different devices really quickly. Okay. Now, the thing about that is there were some kind of limitations in scalability that we really wanted to address. So we've actually gone back to the drawing board and we've rewritten the whole thing from scratch. And I'll tell you a bit more about how we've done that and what it entails and the benefits of it. But we've got three kind of features that derive from that enhancement. And that's really the efficiency in terms of how we work with phones and screenshots. Obviously things like ITL files, which are quite a commonplace thing. And the improvement that we've made on more than one level makes a significant difference in that area as well. So we've actually not just made it faster, we've also optimized the way that we manage ITL files and delete them, etc. And also when it comes to just general macros as well, there's a huge performance increase there. So another feature that we've worked on is the keypad. Now, we've had a little bit of feedback in the past where it wasn't quite intuitive. When you click certain buttons in certain phone models, it didn't do what the user was expecting. So we've normalized all that and made it model independent. So we'll cover that in a little bit of detail. And there's actually quite a lot of other little things as well, but we've just kind of got them under a little tagline of additional enhancements. And the good thing is the software will be available to download today. It's not on the website right now, but what we'll do is we'll publish it about an hour or two after this session's over. We should be able to upload it at that point, and you can feel free to download and explore. So in terms of going into a bit more detail, the first thing I want to talk about is the policy controlled features. So this is something that's only really relevant, to be fair, to Enterprise Edition customers. So that is multiple users wanting to use PhoneView, and ideally at different levels of functionality, either based on their experience or the things and the tasks that they have to perform. Now, previously, we used to bundle a help desk license, which was really everything in PhoneView, but it was limited to selecting just 1 or 2 devices at a time. So you couldn't perform bulk operations. So therefore, a first kind of level help desk person could see and interact with individual devices, but they couldn't deliberately or undeliberately perform bulk actions. That was quite a crude mechanism that we had that allowed you to kind of choose 2 levels of usage for PhoneView just by kind of full functionality or a constrained help desk license. But that's now gone, and we can do that because we can now allow policies to be created against the cluster, and actually goes down to the level of about 25 individual features that can be turned on and off independently. And the thing about that is it means that you can have quite a sophisticated set of policies if you wish. You could have people that just want to do remote control of a single phone, maybe query some data off of it, so that might be a kind of entry level. You might have other people that you want to do bulk updates of phone backgrounds, for example, but you wouldn't want them to do anything else possibly. And there's a whole host of other things in there too. One of the things just to kind of draw some attention to is there's actually the ability to limit phones by associated only. What we mean by that is we've got the mechanic in PhoneView version 4, where if you enable that policy feature, it means that if a user basically gets applied to that policy, only the devices that user account is associated to becomes available and visible within PhoneView. So that's quite useful if you have groups and departments of users that you want to limit, so it's only a kind of subset of the phone estate that they can interact with. So that's a new capability that the policy feature allows us to enable. And there's other things in there such as text messaging, device query. So there's a whole range of features that you can turn on and off, and we'll give you a demonstration of that at the end of the session as well. Now, in terms of the policies themselves, they can be assigned to users and or groups. And the great thing is the way that we've implemented it, it's actually the existing communications manager, users and groups that are there. So you don't have a separate list of accounts that you have to work with and manage and synchronize and things like that. Very simple. When you assign a policy, you search for a user. That user is somebody in Communications Manager, either an application user or an end user. They're just kind of seen together as a single entity. You can pick one of those user accounts and you can assign that policy to them. And the same thing applies for groups. It's all the existing groups in Communications Manager, so you're searching against those. You pick one of them, say, and you can associate the policy to it. So really it makes it nice and simple from an administration point of view. It's just almost like a layer, an extra layer on top of Communications Manager that you can use. So a little bit more detail on how that works. It basically, if you have a policy enabled on a cluster, all it takes, by default, obviously there's no policies exist on a cluster. But within PhoneView, if you create your first policy against a cluster, from that point onwards, it will require a login to use PhoneView. So that basically, so there's a kind of box, a login box, we'll get a screenshot of in the bottom right-hand corner. So as soon as you're using PhoneView, it might open up as normal, have everything kind of turned on and ready to use. But as soon as you interact with a cluster that has policy enabled, it will then force you to authenticate, and you cannot do anything with that cluster until you do authenticate. And once you do authenticate, whichever policy is derived against your user account is then applied to PhoneView, and if certain things are disabled, for example, they will be removed from the products interface, etc., and those features will be disabled or limited depending on the parameters chosen against the policy. So that makes it quite simple. You just log in as normal. Now, again, because that user account is a communications manager user, it's the same credentials as well. So if you have Active Directory integration, it's actually your Active Directory user account. So again, nice and simple, nothing new to work with or learn or integrate against, which makes life easy. Now, the way that the policies work is there's user and group levels of policy. Now, the policy itself is really just a definition of features that are turned on and off, and you can have as many policies as you like. As I say, as soon as you have a single policy, from then on, everybody else talking to that cluster using PhoneView version 4 on your enterprise license will need to authenticate. Now, the way that the policy is assigned is it takes a precedence over the user policy. So if you have an individual user and you specify a policy against that user, it doesn't matter if they're members of groups that also have policies, it will be that user-based policy that will be assigned. It will ignore any group memberships. So that effectively allows you to override specific policies that are assigned to groups for individual users if you want to ensure that that particular user gets certain features. If they don't have a user policy, then it checks if there's any groups that they are a member of when they go to authenticate. It checks if they have any policies assigned. So if they have one or more groups that they're a member of that have a policy, those policy features are combined, and it's an accumulative combination, which means that if two features are disabled on two policies that are combined, it will stay disabled. However, if one of those policies has a feature, then the net result is that feature is enabled. So it's kind of like an OR operation from a kind of Boolean algebra point of view. Now, the thing about that is it just makes it nice and simple. Also follows the same default rules within Communication Manager as well. That's the way that normal group memberships work there. So we've mirrored that as closely as possible, so it's intuitive as well. Now, the thing about actually enabling policies, etc., is we don't want people accidentally kind of locking people out or enabling policies and things like that when they really didn't mean to or didn't intend to. So the way that we control that is only the cluster administrator. And what we mean by that is when you install your Communications Manager cluster and you specify the administration user account, there's obviously two. There's the operating system, and then there's actual Communications Manager administration user. It's that administration user account is the one that you need to use. So only that account can actually enable or initiate the policy on a cluster. And the good thing is the way we've implemented our rules is if for any reason you lock yourself out, so you've only got one user in there and you accidentally didn't enable the ability to administer policies against that user account, and the next time you go into PhoneView, that user or no user other than the cluster admin can log in and use PhoneView. So effectively that's your get out of jail free card if you do make any mistakes with the policy configuration. You can always use that same user account. It gets a kind of default policy which has everything turned on. So that's really it. That's the policy feature. Really pleased that we've been able to add that to the product, and obviously, as I say, it's really for it's Enterprise Edition only. So as much as people with Engineer Edition might have multiple people using a kind of shared installation, which is perfectly fine. We don't, there's no problem with that. It's really enterprise customers that by design expect multiple installations, multiple users. It's just that licensed version that has the policy feature. Okay, so Now to talk about the queuing engine, I'm trying not to make this too kind of technical, so to speak, but just give you a feel for, why we did it, what its benefits are, and some of the parameters and things like that. Now, there's a few slides here, not masses, I think there's about 3 in total, but they cover different aspects, mostly in terms of the benefits that this provides. But basically what happened is we rewrote the queuing mechanism from the ground up. So as I was alluding to before, you could kind of class first generation queuing as in the way that, certainly from our experience, all other kind of remote control products or things that work with phones remotely and do macros and things like that are in the market that we're aware of, they just do that kind of first generation sequential, perform an action on a phone, perform an action on the next phone, one after the other. And that's fine, but obviously there's performance and scaling limits to that down the line. So because of that, as I say, from the very beginning with PhoneView version 1, it actually included this parallel operation. However, the way that was implemented did have some limitations, trying to scale it up really high. One of the limitations was the kind of timing of commands, so sometimes they wouldn't always be executed as quickly against a particular phone as it may be required. So it might press a button and it might be several seconds later than required. It would then be pressed for the second digit, etc. So it wasn't really as efficient and as effective as we wanted it to be, but it served its purpose well. One of the limitations as well was relating to how wide, so to speak, we could make that queue, because if we made it too wide, sometimes it could stress certain components on Communications Manager. So we actually needed the ability to kind of have different levels of concurrency based on what was actually happening in the interface or the component or the system element within Communications Manager. So we really needed a lot more flexibility, so that's why we started from scratch. So we kind of had learned a lot from our previous kind of queuing mechanism, which was already quite a lot more advanced than anything else that was out there, but we were able to leverage some new technology available in the kind of later versions of Microsoft.NET, and by leveraging that, we now have zero limits, which is fantastic. And for the scalability and performance that we've been testing with this is exceptional. Now, to give you a feel for that, it's basically the concurrency is just all running against each CPU. So the more CPUs you have, basically allows PhoneView to run faster performing bulk actions. So it doesn't mean you always need to have lots of CPUs, but the more that you have, the faster the software can run. It properly leverages all that extra capacity in your system. So if you want to do, if you've got 10,000, 20,000 phones in a cluster and you need to do lots of actions and you want to do them really quickly, then it's recommended that you put that on a server with an 8-core CPU or thereabouts. Now, but as I say, it doesn't mean you need that. It's just if you want that extra performance boost, but PhoneView allows that to happen. Now, the thing about the way that the kind of scheduling works, and when we say scheduling, we don't mean like a calendar schedule, as in 10 hours from now do something. We mean real-time scheduling and allocation of tasks, and how they get assigned to CPUs, processes, threads, things like that. Now, as I was saying before, previously it was kind of monolithic, so we had a kind of queue width, which might be like 10 or say 20, and everything that happened always happened at that level of parallelism. Now, the thing about that is, if we're doing certain actions that can't really handle that kind of speed, so to speak, it could put stress or high CPU load on the cluster at points. In particular, we found with larger customers running PhoneView version 3, that when there's a scan operation, for example, they would have to run that out of hours because it could put a heavy load on the publisher, for example. But because we now have this multi-dimensional element, what that really means is there are different dimensions or aspects to the queuing engine, and those aspects depend on what command is being executed. So, for example, if there's a command that goes out to a phone, such as a key press, we can do that a great deal of concurrency. So, typically that will go up to something like 100. So we can basically press the buttons on 100 phones simultaneously because of that. And those phones can, accommodate that, because obviously they've each got their own CPU and it's not really putting a load on Call Manager. However, other components, for example, the Extension Mobility API, that has a constraint which I believe is something like about 15 or something concurrent requests. So we've actually set that down to 10 in that case, so we don't overload that particular API. So that's really one of the key things that we got from the new engine. It was a lot more efficient in terms of how it worked, but also we added the ability to have this multi-dimensional element. So based on the command that's being sent from PhoneView, we can change how much concurrency that happens. And this is just one big piece of glue that sits in the middle of PhoneView. It's a key bit of intellectual property. And what it means is you can do anything you like, goes through the queue, and it's effectively guaranteed to be handled as efficiently as possible. In terms of that maximum efficiency, some key points is it matches the system capacity. So, say each component or element that PhoneView interacts with, it kind of is tied up with how much it can handle, which therefore means you can have the maximum throughput and absolute minimal impact. So in particular, that means that running a scan is a lot quicker, but also it doesn't have any impact on your cluster anymore. So it means you can run a scan during the day, anytime you like, and also it takes less time, which is fantastic. So that's just the kind of general principles of what the queuing engine gives us. I'll give a little bit more examples in a second, but that's why we decided to do it from the ground up, so we could take advantage of all those great benefits. Now, one example that we're able to leverage from this enhancement is screenshots. Now, there's a couple of elements to this, but just to kind of take you through them a little bit, is screenshots are now back-to-back. So the previous queue mechanism was kind of time schedule based, so you would say, take a screenshot every 5 seconds and, would reinsert it into the queue in that time basis. But because we don't have, we've got a new way of doing it, we can make it a lot more efficient. So what we actually now do is what we call back-to-back screenshots. So basically, you take a screenshot for a particular phone. Once it's finished, take another one and repeat. It's as simple as that. So that means as fast as the phone or the network permits, those phone screenshots will refresh. So technically, you can't get any faster. So there are no more time screenshots because of that. So that kind of option in the interface is now gone. It's now a lot simpler, and it's just a single kind of automatic screenshot setting. Now, here's a thing that we're able to do as well, which is a great feature, is currently, or previously rather, with version 3 and earlier, you had to individually select a phone, right-click on it and choose a time interval if you wanted to refresh that device. And that was a deliberate choice, and it's literally the only thing in PhoneView that you couldn't do in bulk. Everything else you could do in bulk. And we made that choice because we didn't want people deliberately or accidentally, selecting 10,000 phones and then trying to take a screenshot every second. It's just not good. It wouldn't help Communications Manager. It wouldn't really benefit the user because they only see so many phones, and it could overload the machine and the network and things like that. So that was pointless. So that's why we had it as an individual phone at a time. However, because of the queuing engine efficiencies and some extra logic that we added, we can now do cluster-wide automatic screenshots. So therefore, bulk automatic screenshots, I guess. I'll show you in action, but it's basically a little switch that you turn on and off. And when you turn this on, any phone that you're looking at, it takes a screenshot automatically back to back. It just keeps refreshing it. So if you're looking at 3 phones, they'll always refresh. You scroll down to look at a different 3 phones, it'll start refreshing those 3 and it'll stop doing the other ones because they're not visible, so no point refreshing them. So it's almost like the screen view within PhoneView is just a window that you can slide and move around and look at different aspects of your phone estate and have a real-time view of those devices. So because of that, it means that it's really real-time in terms of just the entire estate that you're looking at, and it's only a single mouse click to enable, so you don't have to individually work your way through phones. However, we also left in the ability to individually turn phones on and off. So for example, you may have a phone on your desk, you can make sure that it's always refreshing, and you can choose to turn cluster-wide screenshots on and off whenever you like. So I'll show you that in the demo, obviously, but that's you know, a feature that's been requested for a number of years now, so it's great to finally be able to deliver that. A little bit more technical detail in terms of how we're able to do such kind of real-time efficiencies for remotely controlling phones is we've got simultaneous screenshots and key presses. So not only do we have those screenshots going back to back when the automatic screenshots are enabled, you can obviously still control and interact with them, but the key thing is when the phone's registered, that interaction goes over CTI, as you can see the diagram, and then it goes back down to the phone itself via the signaling channel, via skinny or SIP. So it kind of means that you're using kind of two separate paths to the phone, but on top of that, it's actually two separate queues in PhoneView as well. So when we built the new queuing engine, we didn't just have effectively one queue per phone, we actually created two queues per phone. So there's we've kind of got, the way we call them is we've got one queue is interactive, so that's really where the key presses and those types of actions go that the user requests. And we've got what we call an idle queue or a refresh queue, and that's where the screenshots go. So it means that you can have a screenshot downloading, and even that's taking, you know, a second or two to come back from the phone. Even during that second or two, key presses can be sent because they're going to be a separate queue, and on top of that, a separate actual communications path via CTI. And then finally, we've also, just to kind of, the diagram helps to explain it, we can also control phones as we've always been able to do actually, maybe not always been very obvious, when they're in SOST mode or unregistered as well. So if PhoneView knows that the phone is unregistered, because obviously we get the status from Call Manager, so if you do a group update and we have that status and we see there's some devices that are unregistered, when we go to kind of control that phone, and automatically it will fall back and use the web server as the mechanism for doing that. So it's great, gives you maximum coverage and is efficient as it's technically possible. Okay, so again, ITL file discussion. Sometimes it does feel it's the only thing we talk about, even though the product does a considerable amount more. We do put a lot of focus on this because it is a big problem for a lot of people. So, you know, it's our job as we see it to make people's life easier. So the more effort we put into managing ITL files and solving these problems, the less time people need to spend having to worry about the issues or fix them themselves. So in terms of ITL file management, because of the enhancements in the queuing engine and some other changes that we've made in terms of the macro and some research that we did, we've actually made some quite significant improvements to the point that it's no longer required to reboot or reset the phone. So beforehand, we would advise people to do a hard reset so that the phone would be in a known state in terms of locked, etc. That's no longer required. And that's great because that saves you a good, 2 or 3 minutes waiting for the phones to come back, etc. Or, that cycle every time you'd have to do it, you'd have to worry about, rebooting phones, and which obviously can disrupt users. Also, there's no need for the separate unlock macro. Now, we've still left it there so you can still use it, but there's no need to use that anymore in the steps. So normally it would have been a reboot, an unlock, and then a delete ITL. But we've reworked the ITL macro itself so that none of that is essential. You can still do it if you really want to, but with version 4, it's not required. Now, in part of this research as well, we've actually figured out that we can delete ITL files even when a user's on a call. So one of the things that can be a little bit tricky, especially with a slower queue mechanism, such as other tools and products would use, you'd have, a kind of change window could be pretty long normally if you had, thousands of ITL files to delete using kind of other techniques. We've kind of addressed that as well. But even if you want to delete ITL files, you can now do that out with a change window, which is fantastic. It would probably take some advice from us on the detail of how to do that, etc. But the updated ITL macro mechanic allows that to happen. And obviously, therefore, you've got minimal end-user disruption. So, if you're doing an upgrade and a change and something goes wrong and your change window runs out or you've got something you need to do, you don't have to wait, another weekend or whenever it is before you resolve the issue. And in particular, because of, again, PhoneView's unique ability to detect which phones have a problem, it's not that you have to go back to scratch and, try and delete ITL files from your entire estate of several thousand phones, say. You can just go to the phones that have an issue, and therefore, even if you do have to disrupt a user at any level, it's just the people with an issue. Okay, so in terms of unmatched performance, this is I was making some bold claims, but because the way that we can able to leverage the next generation queuing engine, we're now really fast, and I'll get an example of that in the next slide. It's also now possible to delete with a single mouse click the ITL file on thousands of phones. No reset, no reboot required. Minimal disruption on the user as well. You just get rid of them, job done, move on. Also, because of the speed and the performance improvements, it's now possible to delete ITL files during a single change window, no matter how big the cluster is. Okay, now that's quite a statement. Let's see if I can put some meat behind that. So I'm making a claim here that we now have the fastest bulk macro performance, and happy to take the Pepsi challenge, but let me try and explain why that is the case. So just to be clear, this is bulk macros, this is just everything in PhoneView because everything goes through the queuing engine, but I'm just using ITL deletes as one example, mostly because it's the biggest risk to a call manager upgrade if you have to sort these files out. So it's always a good reference point. Now, because of the queuing engine, as an example, you can turn, or we can turn or enable or whatever, the concurrency up to a level of, say, 100. Now, we could probably go higher, but just taking that number as an example, which means that we can simultaneously interact with 100 phones at the same time. And if you consider that it takes about 10 seconds for an individual device to get through the sequence and delete an ITL file, that means that there's an average of 0.1 seconds per phone based on using a concurrency level of 100. That's what this example is based on, which means, therefore, that it's 100 times faster than any other tool or product or normal method, as we've kind of called it here, for deleting ITL files or performing bulk actions. So we've checked out a couple of products and tools that are available out in the market that do these types of things, and as far as we're aware, everybody uses what I would class as a first generation queue, which basically means one device at a time. So we're able to do 100 devices at a time, which makes a huge difference. In fact, not to stop there, it's a bit embarrassing, but we've actually got a mechanism that we've figured out that we're currently in research with, where we can make it 5 times faster than that again, so we can get it down to something like 0.02 seconds per phone, which is basically 500 times faster than doing one phone at a time. Okay, so that's not available yet. That's something that we'll figure out how to do it, and at some point in the future, that's something we're looking to add in a future version of PhoneView. So not that necessarily you need to go that fast probably, but certainly 100 times faster does make the world of difference, as I'll try to explain in this table. So obviously on top of that, we'll get minimal user disruption. Again, back to the unique ability to identify phones with an issue. So, for example, if you had a phone estate, as we'll go through in this table, you might only find there's 10% or maybe even less of phones that have an ITL issue. So, you don't have to use a sledgehammer to hit the entire cluster and disrupt everybody. Without disrupting anybody, you can basically find out if there's any problems, and just on that subset, then operate on those devices and fix those problems. So if we take a comparison between what we can do with the new queuing engine based on a concurrency of 100 simultaneous interactions, and compare that to what we class as the kind of normal method or what other tools and products use that are out there, we're basically comparing 10 seconds per phone against 0.1 seconds per phone in this table. Now, I've got an example of 1,000 phones, 10,000 phones, and 40,000 phones. So just imagine this is, say, a single cluster, for example, with that those number of devices. So if you've got PhoneView and you've used the fact that you've got an ITL status, and let's just say only 10% of those phones have a problem. So in that case, if you're in a state with 1,000 phones, only 100 would have an issue. It would only take you 10 seconds to delete those 100 ITL files, because the minimum duration of a ITL delete sequence is 10 seconds. But you can run all 100 of them at the same time. If we then look at the same estate with 1,000 phones, but you need to delete it on all the phones, it takes about 3 minutes. Now, if you were doing it using other tools, products, and techniques that basically do one device after the other, you know, approximating 10 seconds per phone, it works out as just under 3 hours. That's only for 1,000 phones. There's plenty of people with a lot more than 1,000 phones. And then, as you can hopefully see yourselves when you read the table, as soon as you step up to larger environments, the difference is considerable. So, you know, as soon as you hit, there won't be many people with 40,000 phones in a single cluster. You know, we'll certainly get a number of customers with 20,000 and above. But yeah, if we take, say, 10,000 phones, it means if you only have to do 10% of them, because you know which ones have an issue, it's as little as 3 minutes potentially to solve that problem. If you do have to do all 10,000, it's 17 minutes, or let's say it's less than half an hour, for example. And the thing is, it makes a huge difference at that level, because you'd normally have to spend a continuous 28 hours going one phone after the other if you're just doing one phone at a time, basically. So, you know, there's no change window that I'm aware of that would ever fit in 28 hours. So, you know, you're looking at weekends worth of activity, or alternatively, you could have, you know, maybe 4 or 5 engineers all with a copy of whatever tool or product all running at the same time with blocks of phones allocated to them, which gets pretty expensive and time consuming to do. So there you go. One copy of PhoneView, one engineer, and you can do all these things really quickly. So, for example, if you would maybe want to do a before, during, and after sequence where, you know, before an upgrade, during it, and afterward, you can do all of those things in the entire change window, all using this excellent performance improvements we've managed to obtain. Okay, so that's it in terms of queuing. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. But if I kind of move on to kind of user experience functionality, one of the ones that we pulled out to highlight is basically the keypad. Now, PhoneView for a while now has had what we call model-independent macros. That's what that ITL button is. So on the toolbar, if you've ever used it, when you click that button, you can select as many phones as you like of any different model, doesn't matter, and it will figure out what the right key sequence is, like macro effectively, to perform that action. So, you know, we've done the research and the hard work to figure out what's the appropriate buttons and all that kind of stuff and commands to send. You just need to click one button on the interface. It makes it nice and simple and easy, hopefully. But we did get caught out for a couple of people on the keypad because as the slide says, not all Cisco phones models are the same or equal, so certain types of buttons and layouts didn't always map to the same kind of URI command. So, for example, on the 7900 series, if you press the settings button, it would be key settings that would be sent to the phone, and it would press the appropriate button. But if you try to do that with a 9900 series, for example, it wouldn't understand it, because the equivalent kind of application button on that model is key applications. So what we've now done is we've added that model-independent knowledge, effectively, to the keypad, so that if you do press the settings button when you're on the 7900 layout, but you're actually talking to, you know, a different type of model, such as the 9900, it translates it automatically in the background to the equivalent button, which is the applications, and similar for things like the directories and messages and things like that. Line buttons and things, believe it or not, they're not actually equal between models either, but we've translated that. So it's not necessarily a huge benefit in terms of how this kind of thing works. You know, it's just a simple thing that we added. But from an end user's point of view, it just makes life a lot easier. You just click a button that you think is the right button to use, and it should do what you expect it to. Okay, so just to kind of summarize some additional improvements that we've got in there. The automatic software upgrade mechanism that we had in version 3, or we added to version 3, we've actually replaced that completely with a new mechanism, which is a lot more efficient, effective, should be more stable as well. We did have some issues with some antivirus software that would kind of detect some of the upgrade mechanisms some files that we use as part of that self-upgrade. So sometimes that could break PhoneView if certain antivirus products were installed in the same machine. So because we've replaced out the upgrade mechanism, that should avoid those issues. So it just makes it a lot more easier to use, and should make that a lot easier. Simple setup. We have unfortunately been caught out in the past with version 3, in particular 3.5, because the simple setup rules only really apply to Co-Manager 8 or above. You know, obviously everybody's looking to upgrade and things like that, but yep, there's still a huge percentage of people running versions older than Co-Manager 8, obviously. So that meant you had to go through the advanced configuration, and sometimes you get a little bit caught out, and we had a kind of some catch-22s in there that kept forcing you into simple setup, which could be a bit confusing. So the good thing is we've kind of tidied all that up, removed those restrictions, and extended the kind of rule base within simple setup to go all the way back to Co-Manager 5. So that should give us coverage for pretty much everybody that's out there with a production Co-Manager. Another little detail is, this was requested a few times, is the ability to cancel actions in the queue. So if you select 10,000 phones and you press a button by accident, you want to be able to, you know, stop that and cancel it. So there's now a little drop-down option in the bottom right corner that allows you to cancel anything that's in the queue. And again, that was all possible because of the new queuing engine. The way we built it from scratch, we kept that requirement in mind, and we were able to use it. And then finally, we have a new licensing mechanism. So it's a completely brand new license key. So if you do have a version 3 license, it won't apply anymore. You have to contact us to get a new version 4 key. We'll cover a little bit of that at the end. But some of the things that we get from the flexibility from the new license mechanism is it's a bit simpler for enterprise licenses. So we've now got a concept of a cluster activation pin. So if you want to control which clusters your license can be used against, you can just you know, set up a little pin number for you that you can keep secret, so only a kind of key owner can add clusters, for example. And on top of that, we did get caught out on trials quite a lot because, you know, we may limit it to 500 phones, but the phone you want to test with is not in that 500, so it's kind of frustrating. So we've already implemented this in the trial mechanism on the website now. Is you can now go in and specify up to 5 MAC addresses. So if you do have some phones that are on your desk and you want to make sure you can test with them when you're doing a trial, you can pop them in, and they're guaranteed to be in that list of 500. Okay, so I think it's the last slide before the demo, but just a quick call out of some things that we brought to market first, and maybe they're still unique, or they certainly were unique at the time, obviously, which is endpoint management as a solution. Only product, I think, that can still claim that. There's certainly, you know, some organizations that have kind of copied bits and pieces of functionality, but I think we've managed to kind of stay ahead of the curve as far as we can. Bulk macros and updates, that's something that, because of that kind of queuing engine that we had even in version 1, allowed us to do that really efficiently. So that's something that we brought to the market. Model independent macros. There's no need to record you can do that in PhoneView as well, but there's no need to record macros for some of those key actions that we've built in and made the model independent, such as ITL deletes, and we'll get a few more under the covers that we're going to expose shortly. You can basically just choose one action, and we take care of the logic for which model and which key press, etc. Unmatched performance, so that's really what we're announcing today is a key part of it, is the raw speed. So we don't really have a kind of limit as yet in terms of the parallel capacity of the queuing engine. So, you know, we've certainly tested it up to 100 and it works really well, but it probably goes higher. But, you know, so we'll certainly make the claim that it can be up to 100 times faster than anything else that we're aware of that's out there. ITL issues, it was ourselves that first figured out how to, you know, manage all that correctly. Even if you get a pretty nasty catch-22 when you're doing an upgrade, we can fix pretty much any ITL problem. We did that at the beginning, first to figure that out. CTI-based remote control, remote audio, first again to bring that in. And the CTI remote control is particularly advanced with some things we've added to 4, which are under the covers at the moment, but we'll bring some of that out to the market shortly. obviously visualize and interact with the entire phone estate. Nobody else can do that. We can now show you the entire estate in real time, automatic screenshots as well. Endpoint health scan, endpoint security and compliance report. Great ability just to get that full visibility and information in a matter of minutes just by scanning your cluster and generating that report. So I think that's it from a marketing and information point of view. I'm only down to 10 minutes for time, so I've spent that much time talking about queuing. So I'll make the demo as quick as I can to show you the key points. So give us a second, and I'm just going to swap over to my PC. It should be this one. Okay, so what you should now see is PhoneView running. So this is obviously version 4. And I've really just opened it up, haven't really done anything as yet. I do have a filter, so I'm just looking at some of the black and white phones in our lab environment. You can see here I've got 12 phones, 2 rows of 6. Now, first thing to show you is the automatic screenshots. So you can see it's just got the kind of usual placeholder for each phone with some key information. You can do your usual drag select with them, but obviously it's more useful when you can see what's happening. Now, if I right click, you might notice if you use the previous version that there is no timer anymore, so you don't choose how often it's going to refresh. It's just this single option automatic screenshot. And this is the same. You can still just, for an individual phone, turn screenshots on and off. So you can work your way around your phones, and then you could choose that option to turn it on. But here's the new feature, is the ability to do it for all visible phones, effectively your entire cluster or clusters. So if I now click this checkbox here, automatic screenshot, now anything that you can see is now being refreshed automatically. Now, don't know how well this will come through in WebEx, but you should hopefully see the little second hand flashing on the time on all those phones as it continually refreshes them. Now, if I draw attention to the queue, you can see a little green bar, so that's all the way busy as it's taking all the screenshots in the background. But what I'm going to do is close that, and I'll open up the real-time monitor. So what you can see here, just maybe make it a little bit bigger, is we've got over to the right-hand side in the middle, we've got the processor of the cluster that we're talking to. It's a 2-node cluster, so we've got red and green. There's a little spike there when I first turned on the screenshots, but the way phones work is it just authenticates the first time you make a request. After that, it caches the response. So you can basically see that even though we're constantly taking screenshots on those devices, there's no net change in the load and call manager. Registered phones, we'll show you that in a second when we show you deleting ITL files. Now, what I'm going to do is select the top row of phones, and I think all the phones are unlocked at the moment, and I'm just going to lock those. So if I click the lock macro, what I'm going to show you is the top row are going to be locked and the bottom row are going to be unlocked. So I can do a mixture of ITL deletes, and it doesn't really matter if they're locked or unlocked, okay? And I'm also going to show you with a call in place as well. So there we are, we can see the little padlock there for all the phones at the top, and I'll just check on the bottom phones. If I press the settings button on them, as that refreshes, you can see it's unlocked. Okay, so let me just go to all these devices again. I'll just close the settings on them all, and look at that. Isn't that fantastic? You just interacted a single mouse click with 12 devices. It's only because we've got a small lab. If it was more, you would see it all happening simultaneously, and it's refreshing away real time. So we've got all these phones flashing away here, updating. I'm going to select the phone up here. I'm just going to make a wee phone call. So if I do 79127 and soft key 1 to dial, then we click the phone on the right and soft key 1 to answer. So there we go. And you should hopefully see the kind of second hand. It should be ticking away there. So what if we're in this situation, we've got phones locked, unlocked, calls in place, and we want to delete ITL files? This is what we mean by minimal user disruption. Now, if you watch carefully, because this can get quite fast, on this last graph here, this is the registered hardware phones. So I think it's really the red line that will move. So as the phones delete their ITL file, do a quick reset, but they won't do that if they're on a call. So you should see all of them bar 2 do a reset, and then I'll hang up the call and you'll see them reset. So just if you watch carefully, and let's hit the ITL delete button, and then if you watch what happens. So there we go, it's going through the sequence for all the devices. So the bottom row finishes first because they're already unlocked, so it deletes them straight away. You do get the odd straggler, so that phone has reset, it's just it won't refresh its screenshot until it comes back up again, and then it'll see it cleared out. If you look at the graph here, the red line is just dipped down as those devices have reset once they removed the ITL file, and then they've all come back up again. And if we wait a second or two, that straggler should come in. There we are. So that's the ITL files all deleted. Although it deleted the ITL file, but the phones that are on a call haven't been disrupted and hasn't reset the phone. So let's say the user carries on for another minutes, hours, or whatever, doing his phone call, and eventually they hang up. If you watch what happens, so it'll hang up one end of the call, so it'll disconnect, and you can see quickly they do a reset, configuring IP. So after deleting the ITL file, they're now picking up a fresh ITL file. And if you look at the red line here, it's just dipped down by 2 as the phone's reset there, and looking back on again, and you see them going back up to being registered. Looks like that first phone's taking a little bit longer. There we go, that's it back on and registered, and screenshot's working. There we are. So that's really it. That's as good a demo as I can do in terms of showing you how fast PhoneView is. You can now see, interact with your estate with zero considerations, no impact on the processor load there, as you can see, because all that throttling and queuing takes care of that. And the one thing I'll show you, because it's kind of getting close on time now, so it might be a short in Q&A, is the policy feature. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to Group Policy. So this is the enterprise license I've got in this lab machine. So this is the new part. So if we go to Policy, it's got the name of the cluster, so we'll choose that, and when we click that, we're now getting authenticated. Now, there is no policy on this cluster at the moment, so if you let me just log in here. So as I said, only the cluster administrator is actually able to log in. And we can see this is the policy management window, and there's no policies listed, okay? Now, I'm going to add, if I try to go to the users, it doesn't let us, because we have to do a policy first, so it says at least one policy must be added before a user or group can be assigned. So let's do that. So we click Add. Another warning, just to make sure it's clear what you're doing. You're about to add the first policy, and if you do this, and basically from then on, everybody else needs to log in to use the software. So we'll click OK, and here's our policy dialog. So it's just nice and simple. Policy 1, test policy. And what we'll do is I'll select everything. I'm actually going to take off associated devices. So I'll actually kind of remove some phones in my configuration. And if I wanted to, I can turn things on and off. Okay, and I'll show you that in a second. I hit Save. And you can see here's the policy here. I can obviously go back in and edit it, make changes if I wish, save that. I'll just cancel back out. And now that I have at least one policy, I can go over to the Users or the Groups tab. So let's pick a user. So it's the same thing for groups, same mechanic. But if I click Add, we now get an Add Policy User dialog. So let's say I type S and hit Search. So there we are. This is a list of users and application and end users from Communications Manager. I just need to pick one, so I'll just go for myself, the list at the top there. This is the policy I wish to assign. I've only got the one, but obviously if I had more, I could choose it. I click Add, and there we are. So that means that if I log in, next time you use PhoneView and I log into this, this is the policy that I will receive. It's the same thing for groups. If I go Add and Search, here are all the groups. It's just, I think, the defaults on this system. But we'll get one little UnifiedFX policy group, so you can use your own custom ones too. I'm just going to ignore that one for now, actually. I'm just going to use the policy assigned to myself. So let's close it. Now, one thing to note is, if you look at the top bar, it says PhoneView Enterprise Edition, and it now has User Admin Policy, Default Admin Policy. It says that because when I first went to enable the policy, I put the admin user in, so it gave me the kind of default policy the administrator gets. Now, we don't have a logout mechanism in PhoneView. We might add it, it's not because we can't do it, it's just because we chose not to at this stage. But all I'm going to do is close PhoneView and open it again and show you what happens when you start to work with a policy-enabled cluster. But before I do that, if I go to Help and About PhoneView, there's a little extra bit we've put in here, which is you get the policy user and a policy that's been applied and a read-only ability to view the effective policy that user has. And you can see this is a default policy, which basically has everything turned on. Associated devices kind of inverted, because if that was turned on, it would limit the list of phones. So this policy is basically default PhoneView behavior. So if I hit close on there, and I'm just going to close PhoneView completely, and yeah, we're going to exit, and we're not going to save anything at the moment. Just launch PhoneView again. So let me just maximize that. So I'm going to go back into that same cluster. Now, this is a file with data in it, so it just opened the data as normal. But as soon as I go to interact with this queue, this cluster, so let's just say I press a button on one of the phones, look what's happened. It's prompted me to log in, okay? So I'm going to log in as Stephen. In fact, let me just prove something. I'll try and remember that. I think this is another user account. So let me try this user. No policy exists for this user. So if you don't have a policy assigned directly or via a group, you can't basically use PhoneView on this cluster anymore. So this time, I'll just go in as myself, assuming I haven't forgotten my password. Click login. Excellent, so it disappears. You get a little entry in the queue there, just saying policy applied, the user it's applied to. And look, it just sent the key press. I'll just do a quick screenshot so you can see that if it's still there. So it's then carried on and performed the action that I requested. If I look at the top bar, we now have user Stephen Welsh policy 1 as before. If I go to Help PhoneView, About PhoneView, you can see the user. We can click View Policy, and it's the one that I defined, which basically had everything turned on. But what I'll do is I'm going to change that. This is where sometimes it's not very obvious, but what I'll do is I'll disable the ability to send text messages. So if you look here, it's this button on the toolbar, the TXT icon, it says Send Message. If I go to Group Policy, now I've still got the ability to administer policies, so I can still access this. And if you look carefully, I'm going to edit this policy. Text messages, I'm going to clear that out, so it's turned off, and save that. Okay, that's it, it's saved straight away. If I now go close, now that policy has been saved, but it won't actually apply yet. The next time the person logs back into PhoneView, opens PhoneView to use it, it will then take effect. So you can see that text message is still here. However, when you do a group update, it does refresh the policy. So if I do group update the information from call manager, watch what happens to that text message button. It's disappeared. So it basically refreshed the policy, which in this case didn't include text messaging, so it removed it from the product to be able to use it. That's it. If I go to Help, About PhoneView, we can see that the policy is there. If I changed a different policy, the name would have updated to the new one. If I do View Policy, there we are. And I can't change it. It's read-only. Text messages are gone. Okay, that's it. So let me kind of running over time a little bit. So I'm going to swap back over to my slide deck, if I can remember where I put it. And let's bring that up. And Q&A. And whilst we're kind of going through questions for whatever time people want to hang on for, I'll just leave these conclusions up first, which is basically it's a free upgrade to version 4 if you've got a current support contract. You can email licensing at UnifiedFX with your details, contract number, and ideally your existing license key to help us look it up, and we can sort you out with your new version key. We're going to make it available for download today, so we'll get it all arranged after this session. But don't replace it in your production machine until you've got your version 4 key, because if you install it right now, it'll just go back to free mode and your existing version 3 key or license won't work. So you're as well waiting until you get your version 4 key. And we might be a wee bit busy. We'll see how the kind of demand comes in, but we need to work our way through that. Right, so we are a little bit over time. Apologies for that. It was quite a lot of material because we have been working really hard on the latest release. But for anybody that wants to keep on paying attention, we're going to go through the Q&A. Feel free to add some more questions if they occur, and we'll stay on as long as we sensibly can. Okay, so let's have a look. Yeah.
Hi, Stephen. There's 3 questions outstanding. The others have been answered. The first one is from Kevin Lee. And is it possible to now control a phone that was never registered to a cluster and is just on the network with an IP, i.e. search device on IP?
It is possible. There are some prerequisites, which is basically that the authentication URL on the phone is valid and reachable, which is generally always the case if you have a phone that's going into SRST mode, or maybe a phone that's had some kind of issue, like an ITL problem or something that stopped it to register, but it still had its previous information that works. So yeah, you've always been able to do that, but previously you had to manually turn off CTI, but now we've added a bit of extra logic so that if you just do a group update to refresh the kind of device status, if it knows that device is unregistered, it will automatically go to the web server. So the dependency is that authentication URL, and we can cover that in a little bit more detail. What I will do is, for reference, I'll leave up that diagram. Okay, I hope that answers that question.
Okay, the next one is a follow-on question from Kevin. Does the end user or app use account still have to be associated to the device that you need to control via PhoneView?
Yes, so if you're using policy mode, it's the person that logs in, it's their device association that it uses. So yes, it does still need to be associated. What we're actually looking to do, because of some feedback we had on this that requirement, is we're looking at some point in the future to have a kind of mirrored application user account. So maybe it might be like a prefix of UFX underscore and then the same user ID. So let's say I just logged in the demo as Stephen Welsh. So rather than associating the devices to my user account, what we can do is, as a future enhancement, is we're looking at checking to see if there's a prefixed application user to mirror that user and use that account instead. So that means that the actual end user themselves doesn't have to have all the devices associated. That can be used against an application user instead, which is good because it doesn't really affect licensing. It's easier to kind of configure and manage. It kind of stays out of the way, and it means that if you're using Cisco Jabber and other kind of Cisco-related products that depend on device association, you can end up with a really long list that you have to choose when you're using some of those Cisco products. That eliminates that complication. So at the moment, it does need to be associated to the end user, but we are looking to do a minor enhancement in a future release that will take away that dependency.
Okay, another little simple one here from Syed. Does version 4 support Windows 2008 R2?
Sorry, does it support, what was it, Windows 2008 R2? Yes, it does.
Yes.
And if you do have any issues, around any operating system installation or version, just contact us and, we can check out in detail. But, it's been used for quite a long time, all the way back from Windows XP Service Pack 3 onward. And I think we started Windows Server support at Windows Server 2003. So basically anything newer than that, all the way up to 2012 Server and Windows 8.1, you should all be good to go. And as I say, any issues, just contact us for support and we'll take care of it.
Okay, there's one question asked before,
yeah.
Stephen, from Bernie, which I think was a good question that you may want to elaborate a wee bit more on. And it was, how do you do the discovery of which phones have ITL issues?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's not always very obvious. But the ITL status is the feature that we added, and whilst we're talking about it, I'll bring it up in PhoneView. So let me just get rid of some of this stuff here. So ITL status, there's two ways to do it. You can either select devices and do query ITL status and perform the action from there. So that will go away, query the phone and get its ITL status. So let's just say I click that. Now, not all devices have an ITL file or status, so they won't all give you data back. But the ones that do, you can either look at the data view, so you've got a data view column, and then you scroll across quite far. There, it's there. So we can see ITL status here. Generally looks fine, so we've got updated and installed. So if you had a kind of failed or failure message, then you'd have a problem. But it's also summarized in the Data Explorer. So if we expand ITL status, we can see we've got 14 files that we've got information, 14 phones with information from, and everything's good. And if we wanted to, we can click in here and would filter down. So that was using the query button to get it, query ITL status and then filtered selected. But we also included that in the scan. The reason for doing the scan was to make things simpler. So you just use the scan and it gets every bit of data you could ever want relating to the endpoints. And the good thing is, as I say, we did have some limitations because of the previous queuing engine doing scans in normal working hours, but because of the new queuing engine, you can use that anytime you want. And so it's really simple. Scan, just some information at the beginning, click next. Optionally, you can refresh the data from the cluster, but we don't have to do that because we just refreshed it previously. You can optionally log information. We just choose all the phones. TBS status, I'll leave that for now, but just that's an extra thing we can check. And we click next, and then it goes away, gets all that information. So that's why we did the scan. That was really just to kind of make the data gathering exercise really simple. Oh, and great, look, we've got some problems. So that's, I guess, proof endpoint of why we added the scan. Okay, so hopefully that helps Bernie's question.
Okay. Another question just coming from Tim. When will the product be available? Can only see the trial at the moment. When can we expect a new license key?
When you say a new license key, if you've already purchased a product, then you'll need to contact us directly, ideally via email to licensing at UnifiedFX. If you're talking about like the lab edition stuff that we give away for free, later today. So it's kind of 5 p.m. time UK. Once we finish this session, we'll get started in making those changes on the website. We'll change the download page so it'll point to version 4, and we'll change the kind of lab free license key. So maybe 2 hours to kind of get all that finished and ready. So if you check back in the site in a couple of hours, then you should be able to get it.
And just to reiterate, if you're an existing customer using a previous version of PhoneView live in your production environment, if you want to check out version 4, then yes, by all means, download the version on the website and try it out in the lab, etc. But if you want to use it as your production environment, do request a key before you install it from licensing at UnifiedFX.com.
Okay. Cool. I just noticed the other question from Kurt, actually. There's still quite a few folk online, so we'll keep going until the numbers drop off. But yep, a question there asking if it's possible to change the keypad to some other style that's preferred, I guess, depending on maybe slight variations for certain models. No, it's deliberately, it's quite a complicated implementation we got, not deliberately, but to make it flexible and kind of quite realistic to use. So for example, so that's why it's not skinnable. If I pick a phone here, it may not be very obvious via WebEx, but when I click that button, it's actually animated, right? You can see it's going 1, 2, 3, and why don't we just enable screenshots on all the phones? Just because we can. What we should see in a second when that one updates. Oh, there we go. Hold on a second. Let's just put my models down to 41, 61, and zoom in. Let's do that one actually. So if I do 1, 2, 3, you can see that they're obviously being updated, but it's actually quite an advanced interface. It's animated and things like that, so it's not just like static graphics, so that's why it's not skinnable. But we did go to the effort to create 2 layouts. So as an example of the model independent macro, if I click the applications button, so even though I'm a 9900 series kind of model, press the settings on equivalent 7900. So it's actually animated and things like that. So interesting feature request, but I'd have to decline that one, I'm afraid, and I was trying to explain why, because it's kind of an interactive interface. Okay, so let's see what else we have. Slides available on the website. We don't really publish this stuff because you know, we don't kind of like all our information getting out to kind of general public, for it to be kind of controlled. But if you just email us, we can either send you the slides or a link to a video recording if you want. Oh, wait a minute. I just want the keypad that has up. Oh, yeah, good point. So I picked up on a second part to Kurt's question. He's looking for the keypad up, down, left, right. That's good feedback. Yes, it's not in that first keypad. We couldn't really figure out a layout where we could fit it in sensibly and make it a reasonable size. But just in case you weren't aware, and there's no reason why you should be, I guess, you can actually use your keyboard for up, down, left, right. So as long as you've kind of clicked within the screen view, and with my keyboard, if I press the down arrow, you can see it's moving down. Okay, you can even see the nav down. That's kind of why we didn't bother adding the navigation to both keypads, because actually you can use your keyboard. So hopefully, if you're still in line, Kurt, that'll help you a little bit. I'm trying to remember if it even works that way. Yeah, so that's it. Sometimes it animates the buttons when you press them, but not the navigate button. But you can see that just use my keyboard there. I was able to do that. Okay. Any other ones that are obvious there?
I think you covered them all, Stephen.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks very much for your attention. Thanks for hanging on, and hopefully enjoy version 4 as much as we enjoy creating it. Take care. We'll just come in right at the end.